Good morning, you're listening to the brief wake up, your mindful start to the day. I'm Handel, your daily coffee companion, helping you wake up informed, thoughtful, and maybe just a little amused before the day gets old. If you're commuting, corralling kids, or just standing in line for caffeine, you're in the right place. Let's get you caught up. Today for health, we will talk about fasting, what your body is actually doing, and why it matters. Intermittent fasting is often talked about like a diet, but physiologically, it's not really a diet. It's a way of changing which fuel your body runs on, and when. And that's where both the benefits and the risks come from. Here's what's actually happening under the hood. First, fasting flips your body from glucose mode to fat ketone mode. When you eat regularly, your body runs mostly on glucose from carbohydrates. A few hours after you stop eating, insulin levels fall. As insulin falls, your body switches to burning stored fat. That fat gets converted in the liver into ketones, which become an alternative fuel, especially for the brain. This metabolic switch is why fasting often leads to lower insulin levels, improved insulin sensitivity, easier access to fat stores, and modest weight loss. It's not magic, it's fuel switching. That's why people with prediabetes often see improvements. Their cells become less resistant to insulin because insulin isn't being constantly elevated. Second, fasting triggers a cellular cleanup mode. When nutrients are scarce, cells activate a process called autophagy. Think of autophagy as cellular housekeeping. Damaged proteins get broken down. Old mitochondria get recycled. Inflammatory signaling can go down. This is one reason fasting is linked to lower inflammatory markers, improved metabolic efficiency, and possible longevity signaling in animal models. But here's the key nuance. Most of this cleanup happens with moderate fasting, not extreme or chronic deprivation. Third, fasting lowers blood pressure and triglycerides through hormones. During fasting, insulin drops. When insulin drops, the kidneys excrete more sodium. That can lower blood pressure. At the same time, reduced insulin signaling changes how the liver packages fat, often lowering triglycerides. So fasting can improve cardiovascular risk markers. But markers are not the same as long-term outcomes. Fourth, the heart risk controversy, stress biology and circadian mismatch. Here's where newer data raised eyebrows. Large observational studies presented to the American Heart Association found that people eating in very short windows, under 8 hours, had higher cardiovascular mortality. Why might that happen? One theory is physiological stress. Long daily fasts can raise cortisol, activate sympathetic nervous system tone, and elevate resting stress hormones. That's not always obvious, but over years, chronic low-grade stress biology may affect heart rhythm, blood pressure variability, and vascular health. Another issue is circadian timing. Your body handles glucose best in the morning and early afternoon. If you skip breakfast, eat late at night, or compress calories into late hours, you may be fasting, but you're also misaligning with your biological clock. That circadian mismatch can worsen glucose tolerance, lipid handling, and inflammatory signaling. So it's not just how long you fast, it's when you eat. Fifth, why fasting feels powerful and why it backfires for some. Fasting creates structure. For many people, that structure reduces mindless snacking, simplifies decisions, and lowers total calories naturally. That's why it works. But for others, fasting can increase binge-restrict cycles, raise stress hormones, disrupt sleep, and lead to poor food choices in short windows, which cancels out the metabolic upside. The real takeaway: fasting works because it changes fuel use, hormones, and cellular signaling. But extreme fasting may also act like a chronic stressor, especially if it fights your circadian rhythm. The most evidence-aligned version right now is a 10 to 12-hour eating window. Earlier dinners, not late-night compression, high-quality diet of a Mediterranean pattern, and consistency over extremity. Fasting helps because it flips your metabolism and turns on cellular repair. But when it becomes extreme or mistimed, it may also trigger stress biology that the heart doesn't love. The news is next. In the news, we continue to discuss Minneapolis, where the legal and political fallout escalates. Minneapolis is no longer just dealing with protests. It is now at the center of a rapidly expanding constitutional, legal, and federal state power fight. Here's what's developed over the past 48 hours. First, the federal courts have stepped in a major way. A U.S. district judge in Minnesota has summoned the acting ICE director to appear in court, warning that the agency could be held in contempt for ignoring court orders. Judges say ICE has repeatedly failed to release detainees when ordered, transferred people out of state to avoid rulings, and bypassed due process protections. That's a rare and serious move. Federal judges threatening contempt against a major federal agency. Secondly, the Trump administration is reshuffling leadership and quietly scaling back. Border Patrol Commander Greg Bovino, who oversaw much of the aggressive posture in Minneapolis, is being removed from the operation. The White House has put Tom Homan, the so-called border czar, directly in charge. Local officials confirmed that some federal agents are beginning to leave the area, signaling partial de-escalation, even as ICE operations themselves continue. Third, Minnesota is challenging the operation on constitutional grounds. The state of Minnesota and the cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul have filed suit arguing that Operation Metro Surge violates the 10th Amendment, calling it an unconstitutional federal occupation and an attempt to coerce state and local governments. Judges are now openly questioning whether deploying roughly 3,000 federal agents inside a state for general enforcement crosses legal limits. Fourth, Congress is escalating pressure on DHS leadership. Calls for Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem's resignation or impeachment are growing in Congress. Lawmakers are accusing DHS of misleading statements, abuse of power, and failure to follow court orders. House Democrats are preparing formal investigations, and bipartisan concern is emerging around federal overreach and civil liberties. Fifth, protests are spreading and evolving. What started as local demonstrations has turned into a broader movement. Minnesota saw a rare general strike, and protests are now appearing in other major cities in solidarity. Meanwhile, police report ongoing arrests around hotels where federal agents are staging, with tensions continuing even as some federal forces begin to withdraw. Why does this matter nationally? This is no longer just a Minneapolis story. It's becoming a test case for how far the federal government can go inside a state, whether immigration enforcement can override court orders, the limits of executive authority, and how constitutional federalism works in practice. This is shaping up to be one of the most significant federal-state power confrontations in years, with Minneapolis as the flashpoint. The Big Sip is next. For The Big Sip, we're starting a short series on grief. Not in a motivational way, not in a 5 stages way, but in a way that explains what grief does to your brain, your body, and your sense of reality after loss. Because almost everyone will experience grief, and almost no one is taught how it really works. Over the next 7 segments, we're going to look at grief as a biological and deeply human process. What happens in your brain after loss, why certain days hit harder, why people grieve differently, and how you learn to live in a world shaped by absence. This series is called Living with Absence, because grief isn't just missing someone. It's learning how to live in a world where someone who mattered is no longer there. This is segment 1, Your Brain After Loss. If grief were just sadness, it would be easier. It isn't. Grief is what happens when your attachment system, one of the deepest systems in the human brain, loses someone it is wired to expect. Your brain is not just a thinking machine. It is a prediction machine. It constantly models your world. Who belongs in it? Who is supposed to be there when you wake up? Whose voice it expects to hear? Whose messages it anticipates? And whose role is built into your daily life? These predictions aren't abstract. They are literally encoded in neural circuits. So when someone dies or leaves your life, something strange happens. Your thinking brain understands the words. They are gone. But your attachment brain doesn't update on command. It's slower. It's emotional. It's built on repetition and expectation, not logic. That's why you still reach for your phone. That's why you still think you hear their voice. That's why you still have that split-second moment where you forget and then remember. That moment can feel disorienting, sometimes even frightening. But that's not denial. That's biology. Neuroimaging studies show that grief activates the same attachment and reward circuits that light up when you bond with someone you love. These are the systems that generate longing, closeness, and connection. At the same time, your brain's stress system is turned up. So neurologically, grief is a brutal combination. You are yearning and stressed at the same time. That's why grief is so exhausting. It's not just emotional pain, it's also cognitive load, and it's nervous system strain. It's why your sleep gets disrupted, why your concentration drops. It's why your memory feels unreliable, or also why your body feels off. Just heavy, tense, achy, wired, or even numb. Your nervous system is trying to solve a problem it cannot solve. And from the brain's evolutionary perspective, this makes sense. For most of human history, separation usually meant reunion. Someone leaves to hunt, to travel, gather, and then they return. Our attachment system is built for that kind of world. However, death is the one kind of separation that never resolves. So the brain keeps checking. It keeps running background processes. Maybe they'll text. Maybe I'll see them. Maybe this is a mistake. Not because you're irrational, but because your brain is designed to preserve bonds. If you've ever thought, I know they're gone, but part of me still expects them, that's not a failure to accept reality. That's your attachment system slowly recalibrating to a new world. A world where someone who mattered is no longer there. That recalibration takes time. Not because you're weak, but because the bond was real. Grief is not something you get over. It is something your brain has to rewire around. And that rewiring is one of the hardest things a human nervous system can be asked to do. Grief is not weakness. It's not a lack of resilience. It's not something broken in you. It is what a bonded brain does when a bond is broken. Next episode, we will discuss the myth of closure. The lighter roast is next. Are we giving the discount version of ourselves? This is our lighter roast topic. When we're young, we love like we have nothing to lose. Big emotions, big gestures, long conversations that go nowhere but feel important. Intensity, drama, and urgency. Not necessarily healthy, but passionate. Early relationships feel like everything is at stake. Because emotionally, it kind of is. You don't have history yet. You don't have scars yet. You don't have 5 past versions of yourself saying, careful. So you show up loud, raw and unfiltered. But something interesting happens over time. As we get older, we get better at relationships, but also quieter. We communicate more efficiently. We regulate our emotions better. We don't blow up over every feeling, which is good, but it also means the emotional temperature drops. The highs are lower, the lows are less explosive, the middle becomes calmer, and that raises an uncomfortable question. Are we giving the least passionate version of ourselves to the relationships that happen later in life? Think about it. Your first love's got the unprotected version of you, the version with no filters, no defenses, no emotional budgeting. Later relationships get the version with spreadsheets. You've learned where it hurts. You've learned what it costs to fall apart. So you start hedging. You still care. You still love. But you also manage. You pace yourself. You keep emotional reserves. You don't go all in as fast. So is that growth? Or is that emotional thrift? Here's the twist. What we call less passion might be a different kind of intensity. Early passion is fueled by novelty and uncertainty. Late passion is fueled by choice. Early love is chemistry. Late love is commitment. Early love says, I can't help how I feel. Later love says, I'm choosing to be here, and those don't feel the same in your body. Butterflies feel like passion. Consistency feels like calm. Calm doesn't get movies made about it. But calm is what lets people build real lives. So maybe it's not that later relationships get the least passionate version of us. Maybe they get the most deliberate version. The version that's been hurt and still shows up. The version that knows what it costs and pays anyway. The version that doesn't confuse chaos for connection. That's not less passion. That's passion with memory, which is quieter, heavier, and in some ways, braver. Because early love risks heartbreak. Later love risks something harder. It risks doing it again after you already know how much it can hurt. Our commemoration is next. Today marks several moments that sit at very different ends of the human experience. On this day in 1986, the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded just 73 seconds after liftoff, killing all 7 crew members, including teacher Krista McAuliffe. It remains one of the most defining moments in U.S. space history, a reminder of the risks of exploration, institutional pressure, and how small technical decisions can have catastrophic consequences. January 28th is also a literary milestone. In 1813, Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice was first published anonymously, a novel that would go on to shape how generations think about relationships, class, and social perception, and still quietly influences modern storytelling more than 2 centuries later. It's also a day for quiet engineering history. In 1958, Lego patented the interlocking brick design still used today. A simple invention that created a system that scaled across generations, with more than 60 years of backwards compatible creativity. And in 1985, music and global activism intersected when USA for Africa recorded We Are the World, raising tens of millions for Ethiopian famine relief and setting a template for how pop culture could be mobilized for global causes. And because this is real life, not just history, today is also National Blueberry Pancake Day, a socially acceptable excuse to eat dessert for breakfast and call it health adjacent. It's also National Plan for Vacation Day, which is not actually a vacation, just a reminder to open a few travel tabs, price trips you may not book, and mentally take PTO. A day that holds tragedy, literature, invention, global generosity, and pancakes. That's January 28th. Today we looked at how timing matters, whether it's when you eat, when power is exercised, or when loss rewires the brain. From fasting biology, to a constitutional clash in Minneapolis, to how grief reshapes attachment, and how relationships evolve over time. Today's through line was this: our systems, personal and political, are shaped as much by timing and stress as by intention. And maybe the work isn't to be perfect, but to be deliberate with our bodies, our choices, and the people we keep showing up for. This is Dr. Robinson for The Brief Wake Up. Be kind, calm, and curious. We will catch you next time.